I'm Reagan, 33, female. I live in a city loft that's probably too big for one person, filled with sound diffusers and audio equipment that most people would mistake for modern art. By day, I run a successful acoustic engineering firm with my business partner, shaping the way the world hears everything from concert halls to electric cars. But my success was built on a foundation of rejection, a story that begins with the family who wrote me off and ends with them begging me to sign their paychecks. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It all started 10 years ago in a stuffy lawyer's office that smelled of old paper and disappointment. I was 23, fresh out of college with a specialized degree in acoustic engineering. My family, who had built their legacy on the very tangible, very loud business of manufacturing machine parts, saw my passion as a frivolous hobby. My grandfather, Thomas, a man whose voice could command a factory floor into silence, had just passed away. The entire family was gathered for the reading of his will, their grief barely masking their greed. My Aunt Linda, my father's sister and the self-appointed matriarch of the family, sat with a posture so rigid she could have been mistaken for the mahogany chair she occupied. Her son, my cousin Kevin, a year older than me, sat beside her, mirroring her smug certainty. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, cleared his throat and began to read. The family business, Thomas Manufacturing, along with the majority of the estate, was to be left to a trust managed by Aunt Linda, with Kevin positioned to take over operations. It was exactly what they'd expected. My father had passed years earlier, so I was the loose end. When my name was finally mentioned, a wave of pitying glances washed over me. Grandfather Thomas had left me a sum of $50,000. The will included a personal, handwritten note. Mr. Davies read it aloud, his voice flat and unemotional. To my granddaughter, Reagan, I hope this money allows you to pursue a more practical education and find a stable career. A life spent playing with sound waves is no life at all. The room was silent for a moment before Aunt Linda let out a sigh that was pure performance. Well, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, your grandfather always wanted what was best for you, dear. Perhaps you can get a business degree. There might be a place for you in the company's accounting department one day. Kevin just smirked, already looking like the lord of a manor he hadn't earned. The inheritance wasn't a gift, it was a dismissal. It was my family's final word on my ambitions, my passions, and my worth. They saw $50,000 as a settlement to make me go away quietly. They didn't realize they had just given me the seed money for my revenge. I took the check, walked out of that office without a word, and never looked back. That money, meant to break me and mold me into their image, became the cornerstone of my own company. I cashed it the next day, and with my college friend and brilliant software developer, David Chen, we incorporated Clarity Audio. They thought they had cast me out. In reality, they had set me free. The next 5 years were a blur of 80-hour work weeks, ramen noodle dinners, and the exhilarating thrill of building something from nothing. David and I poured everything we had into Clarity Audio. Our first office was a cramped room above a laundromat, but it was ours. While Thomas Manufacturing continued to churn out the same metal parts they had for 50 years, we were chasing the future. We developed proprietary noise cancellation algorithms, designed revolutionary sound, dampening materials from recycled plastics, and consulted on the acoustics for everything from recording studios to open-plan offices that were actually functional. Our reputation grew slowly, then all at once. We started with small contracts, but soon we were getting calls from major architectural firms and tech companies. The $50,000 insult had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. During that time, I made a few half-hearted attempts to bridge the chasm with my family. I sent birthday cards that were never acknowledged and made calls that went to voicemail. The final, definitive rejection came on Christmas Day, 5 years after the will reading. I was back in my hometown visiting a friend and, on a foolish whim, decided to stop by Aunt Linda's house for the annual family gathering. I convinced myself that my success might have changed their perspective. I bought an expensive bottle of scotch for Kevin and a designer scarf for my aunt, walking up to their front door with a nervous tremor in my hand. Kevin answered the door. His smirk from the lawyer's office had now settled into a permanent expression of smug superiority. Reagan, he said, his tone flat, making my name sound like an interruption. What are you doing here? Before I could answer, Aunt Linda appeared behind him, her arms crossed. Her eyes scanned my expensive coat and confident posture, and the displeasure on her face was immediate. "We're in the middle of a family celebration," she said, her voice as cold as the winter air. I held up the gift bag. "I just wanted to drop these off and say Merry Christmas." Aunt Linda looked at the bag as if it contained something infectious. "We don't need your charity, Reagan," she snapped. "You made your choice when you turned your back on this family and your grandfather's legacy. You wanted to play with your little noises, so go, we're busy." She didn't shout. It was worse. It was a calm, deliberate execution. She was drawing a line, making it clear which side I was on. Kevin just stood there, his silence a form of agreement. He took a small step back, and my aunt began to close the door. It wasn't a slam. It was a slow, quiet, and final closing. The click of the latch echoed in the silent, snowy street. I stood there on the porch for a full minute, the beautifully wrapped gifts feeling heavy and foolish in my hands. That was the day I stopped trying. They didn't just shun me, they had erased me. As I walked back to my car, the hurt solidified into something harder, colder. It was resolve. I would no longer measure my success by whether they approved. From that day forward, I would measure it on a scale they could never hope to achieve. Another 5 years passed. In that time, Clarity Audio exploded. We landed a landmark contract with a leading electric vehicle manufacturer to design the sound profile and interior acoustics for their entire fleet. The deal was worth tens of millions and put us on the map globally. Our hobby was now a recognized industry leader. I moved into my loft, David bought a house in the suburbs, and our team grew to over 50 employees. I traveled the world, spoke at conferences, and my work was featured in design and tech magazines. The memory of my family, once a persistent ache, had faded into a dull, distant scar. I had built a new life, a new family with the people at my company. I honestly didn't think about Aunt Linda or Kevin at all. Then, one Tuesday morning, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple, family matter. The sender was Kevin. I almost deleted it, assuming it was a phishing attempt, but morbid curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and the tone was nothing like the arrogant cousin I remembered. The words were stilted, awkward, and reeked of desperation. He started with a clumsy attempt at small talk, saying he'd heard I was doing well, and that he was impressed. Then he got to the point. Thomas Manufacturing was facing significant headwinds and challenges in a changing market. These were flimsy corporate euphemisms for "we're failing." He wrote that he and his mother, Aunt Linda, believed there was a synergistic opportunity for our two companies. He was proposing a meeting to discuss a potential acquisition. He wanted me to buy them. I read the email 3 times. A bitter, ironic laugh escaped my lips. The sheer nerve was breathtaking. After a decade of complete silence, after being publicly humiliated and disowned, they were coming to me for a bailout. They weren't appealing to me as family. They were approaching me as a bank. The boy who watched his mother close the door in my face now wanted me to open my wallet and save him. The woman who told me my career was a joke now wanted that same career to fund her retirement. My first instinct was to type a 1-word reply, no, but then I paused. David walked into my office with 2 coffees, saw the look on my face, and asked what was wrong. I showed him the email. He read it, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, he said, handing me a coffee. "Look what the cat dragged in. What are you going to do?" An idea, cold and clear and sharp, began to form in my mind. This wasn't just an email, it was an invitation. It was the key to a door I thought was locked forever. "I'm going to take the meeting," I said, a new kind of energy coursing through me. "And David, I want you to start digging. I want to know everything about Thomas Manufacturing, their finances, their debts, their suppliers, every dirty little secret. I want to walk into that meeting knowing more about their company than they do." While Kevin was likely celebrating what he saw as a successful first step, David and I went to work. My role was to play the part of the potentially interested buyer. I replied to Kevin's email with cautious, professional optimism. I agreed to a preliminary meeting in 2 weeks, framing it as an exploratory discussion. I asked for their financials, their business plans, and their list of assets and liabilities. The documents they sent over were a masterclass in creative accounting. They had inflated asset values, hidden the extent of their debt, and painted a picture of a company that was merely weathering a storm, rather than actively sinking. They were treating me like an amateur, a sentimental fool who would be blinded by the family legacy, and wouldn't look too closely at the numbers. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who now regularly dissected billion, dollar contracts for a living. Meanwhile, David was doing what he did best, finding the truth hidden in the data. As a software genius, he moved through the digital world with an elegance I could only admire. He wasn't hacking them, he was simply using publicly available information with a level of skill they couldn't comprehend. He scraped county records, referenced business filings, and pulled reports from commercial credit agencies. He built a complete, unvarnished picture of the disaster that was Thomas Manufacturing. The truth was far worse than their doctored books suggested. The company wasn't just struggling, it was insolvent. Aunt Linda, in a desperate attempt to maintain her lavish lifestyle and the illusion of success, had taken out a series of high-interest loans against the company's property and equipment. She had used the family business as her personal ATM. Kevin, for his part, had made a string of catastrophic business decisions. He had tried to modernize by investing in cheap, unreliable machinery from an overseas supplier, resulting in massive production delays and a decline in quality. Their oldest and most loyal clients had started to leave. They had missed payroll twice in the last quarter and were months behind on payments to their key suppliers. The picture that emerged was one of arrogance, incompetence, and decay. They had inherited a stable, respected business and had systematically dismantled it through sheer hubris. But David's most crucial discovery was about their debt. The primary lender holding the note on their factory and land was a large, impersonal commercial bank. Due to the high risk of default, the bank had likely bundled that debt and would be willing to offload it at a significant discount to avoid a messy foreclosure. The debt was the chain around their necks. And David had just found the key to the lock. We now knew they weren't just in trouble, they were on the verge of total collapse. Their desperate email wasn't a business proposal. It was a Hail Mary pass before the company was seized by the bank. They thought they were luring me into a trap. They had no idea they were walking into mine. The night David presented his findings, we sat in my office, the city lights twinkling below us. The data was laid out on my monitor, a story of failure told in spreadsheets and legal documents. The path forward was crystal clear. A simple buy-out was what they wanted. They imagined I would write a massive check, take over their mess, and allow them to walk away with millions, their pride intact. They would toast to their cleverness while I was left cleaning up their disaster, but that was never going to happen. They think you're coming to save them, David said, leaning back in his chair. What they don't know is that you're the storm. We spent the next week architecting the plan. We codenamed it Operation Sound of Silence, a nod to our company's work and the fact that our goal was to permanently silence their arrogant, dismissive voices. Step 1 was the most critical. We created a shell corporation, a completely anonymous entity with no legal ties to me or to Clarity Audio. Through this corporation, our lawyers approached the commercial bank that held the debt for Thomas Manufacturing. Just as David predicted, the bank was eager to get the toxic loan off its books. They saw a failing company and saw our offer as a chance to recoup some of their losses without a lengthy legal battle. After a few days of negotiation, our shell corp purchased the entirety of Thomas Manufacturing's debt, all the loans on the property, the factory, the equipment, for roughly 40 cents on the dollar. It was a significant investment for us, but a calculated one. With a single transaction, I went from being the outcast granddaughter to being their primary creditor. I was now, for all intents and purposes, their bank. They just didn't know it yet. Step 2 was preparing for the meeting. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. It was going to be a notification. I didn't prepare a purchase offer. Instead, I had our legal and finance teams draw up a brutal but fair restructuring plan. The plan detailed our assumption of all assets in exchange for forgiving the debt they could never hope to repay. It included a transitional budget that would guarantee the jobs and pensions of their 30-plus employees, many of whom had worked there since my grandfather's time. Protecting them was non-negotiable for me. The plan also included a section on management restructuring, which explicitly stated the immediate termination of the company's CEO and operations manager, Aunt Linda and Kevin. They would receive no severance, no golden parachute, just a cardboard box for their personal belongings. I prepared a short, sharp presentation. It started with their inflated numbers, then systematically replaced them with the real, devastating figures David had uncovered. The final slide was a copy of the debt transfer agreement, clearly showing my new shell corporation as the sole lien holder. I was ready. I felt no rage, no desire for a screaming match. All I felt was a profound, chilling sense of calm. The silence before the sound. The boardroom at Thomas Manufacturing was a monument to faded glory. The long oak table was scratched, the leather chairs were cracked, and portraits of my grandfather and great-grandfather stared down from the walls, their stern expressions seemingly judging the decay. Aunt Linda and Kevin sat on one side of the table, looking expectant. Linda had dressed for a victory, wearing a power suit and a predatory smile. Kevin just looked nervous, fidgeting with his pen. They thought this was their lifeline. "Reagan, thank you for coming," Linda began, her voice oozing a false warmth that made my skin crawl. "As you know, Thomas Manufacturing has been a cornerstone of this community for generations. It has a strong foundation, and with a modern partner like you, its potential is limitless." Kevin chimed in, launching into a rehearsed speech about synergy and vertical integration. Using business jargon he clearly didn't understand. He presented their doctored financials on an old, flickering projector screen. I let them talk for 20 minutes, nodding politely, giving them enough rope. I didn't interrupt. I let them build their entire fantasy, a world where they were savvy business leaders negotiating a brilliant exit. When they finally finished, they looked at me, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. "So," Aunt Linda said, leaning forward, "we are prepared to discuss a valuation." I didn't say a word. I simply took out my laptop, connected it to their projector, and replaced their fantasy with my reality. The first slide showed their company's real valuation, negative. The next slides detailed the hidden loans, the defaulted payments, the loss of key clients. I narrated the facts in a calm, steady voice. With each slide, the color drained from their faces. Linda's smile faltered, then vanished. Kevin sank lower in his chair, his gaze fixed on the table. "You're not just in trouble," I concluded, my voice even. "You are insolvent. The bank was set to begin foreclosure proceedings next month." Linda scoffed, a last gasp of defiance. "That's absurd. Our relationship with the bank is perfectly fine." It was. I corrected her. "Until last week." I clicked to the final slide. It was a copy of the debt assignment. "Your relationship is now with me, or more accurately with my holding company, which purchased every cent of your debt. I own the note on this building, the land it sits on, and every piece of equipment in it." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Kevin looked like he was going to be sick. Aunt Linda stared at the screen, her mind clearly struggling to process the information. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally to pure, unadulterated fury. You did this behind our backs," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You plotted to steal our family's company." I finally looked her directly in the eye. My voice was no longer neutral, it was cold. "Your company, you ran your father's legacy into the ground to pay for your country club membership. You let your son make disastrous decisions while you bled it dry. This company died because of you. I am not stealing it. I am acquiring the corpse to see if any part of it is worth salvaging." "But we're family," she sputtered, the final, pathetic plea of a true manipulator. That was the moment I had waited 10 years for. An echo of a cold winter's day filled my memory. "Family," I repeated, standing up. "The day you closed your door in my face, you made it very clear what we were. You told me to go play with my noises. Well, I did, and now I own the silence. The restructuring plan is on the table. The employees will be protected. You two will be out by the end of the day. This isn't personal. It's just sound business." I left the printed plan on the table, packed my laptop, and walked out of the boardroom without looking back, leaving them to be haunted by the echo of their own cruelty. The year that followed was one of transformation. I didn't tear down the old factory. It had good bones, and more importantly, it was staffed by good people who had been let down by terrible management. My team from Clarity Audio and a group of turnaround specialists descended on Thomas Manufacturing. We didn't come as conquerors, but as builders. I held an all-hands meeting the first week and assured every employee that their jobs and pensions were safe. I told them we were investing in the future, not liquidating the past. You could feel the collective sigh of relief in the cavernous space. We invested millions in new machinery, retraining programs, and safety upgrades. We retooled the entire facility. The old, greasy machines that stamped out crude metal parts were replaced by clean, precise equipment for manufacturing high-end speaker components and specialized acoustic paneling. We brought the old factory into the 21st century. We renamed the division Thomas Innovations, a nod to my grandfather, but focused on the future, not the past. The division became a crucial part of Clarity Audio's supply chain, profitable within 6 months. The new legacy wasn't just about success, it was about respect for the work, for the employees, and for what the company could be rather than what it had been. As for Aunt Linda and Kevin, their fall was as swift as it was complete. News travels fast in a small town. Linda, stripped of her status symbol, became a local pariah. The woman who built her identity on being the heir to a business dynasty was now known as the one who destroyed it. She had to sell her large house and move into a small condo. I heard from a former employee that she now works part-time as a cashier at a department store. Kevin disappeared for a while. About a month ago, a letter arrived at my office. It was from him. He wrote that he was working an entry-level job for a logistics company 3 states away. The letter was a rambling, pathetic mix of apology and self-pity. He said he was sorry for how he treated me, but most of the letter was about how unfair his life had become. It was clear he wasn't sorry for what he did, only for the consequences he now faced. I read the letter, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a sense of closure. He and his mother had built their world on a foundation of arrogance and exclusion. When that foundation crumbled, they were left with nothing. I dragged his letter to the trash icon on my desktop and deleted it permanently. I then turned my chair to face the window of my office, which overlooked the bustling city. The past was finally quiet. I had work to do, a new legacy to build, and a future to design, filled not with the echoes of old grievances, but with the clear, beautiful sound of my own success.